Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society. His website, resourceworks.com. You can find him on Twitter at SJMuir. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Thank you, Jim.
Stewart, how are we doing in producing LNG? I know BC is awash in natural gas, something like 200 years of proven reserves. Alberta's most likely got a lot more than that, so no doubt we can get LNG out to the rest of the world. Asia really loves it because it means they don't have to use coal anymore. But how are we doing in getting our LNG to Asia?
Well, it's interesting because you can look at some parts of the world where there's a lot happening in LNG. But if you look at our part of the world, in Western Canada, there still isn't anything significant happening in LNG in terms of it moving to the places where it's needed in the world. And if we go and look at, say, the southern USA, the Gulf of Mexico in particular, over the last 10 years, they have seized the opportunity. I just was looking at news from the Gulf, 20 ships of LNG, 20 LNG cargo tankers departed from ports with load to bring out a lot of it to Asia, different markets around the world. And they've created that opportunity in just a few short years. It's now 2021. It's been 10 years since I first started paying attention to LNG, realizing that it provided this opportunity for cleaner energy supply all around the world. Wherever they use more challenging, environmentally unsound methods of getting electricity, they want natural gas, and that's LNG. And so that's why the opportunity arose. At one time, on the west coast of Canada, we had, I think, 16 proposed LNG terminals. So far, none of them have been turned into export terminals. Although, of course, in Kitimat, we have currently Canada's biggest infrastructure project being built now, which is the LNG Canada site. And then in Squamish, we have wood fiber LNG that it's hoped there will be a positive decision to go ahead and build that. We've seen some interesting developments at a smaller scale on the Fraser River by Fortis BC that's got some kind of smaller limited uses of LNG from its peak shaving plant there. But broadly speaking, this opportunity that could have been Canada's, we could have been sending 20 cargoes to Asia where that gas is needed per week, like they are in the southern USA. We could have been the one who was out there doing that, and we haven't because we're plagued by regulatory uncertainty, really. It's not for want of gas. There's plenty of gas in Western Canada, plenty in BC. There's plenty of capital that was interested in building things. There's plenty of ways to get the gas to the coast and places to build a terminal, but it seems like Canada is unlike every other country that's wanted to develop LNG. It's been, except for Mozambique, where they've been plagued recently by violent insurrections that have caused one of the projects to be at this moment closed down. But everywhere else in the world where they've wanted LNG, they've made it happen, and we haven't yet. So it's really disappointing. Canada can be part of this clean energy transition on a global scale, but it's not letting itself, which is just, it really is the greatest lost opportunity. One of those ships has cargo worth probably $100 million. So that means $2 billion a week of wealth is being created for the United States of America by having realized an LNG opportunity that's actually of a much lesser scale than what ours is. So Canada could easily be producing $2 billion. Just imagine the benefits that we would get as a country if we had that, Jim. It's incalculable.
Well, you have the mayor of Vancouver who wants to stop oil and gas exploration this very moment. Obviously, we're supposed to go back to what, horses?
Yeah. When you have these proposals, they typically, well, always are not based on any sort of reality that aligns to people living more or less as they do. Yes, we obviously need to change the way we consume things. Everyone knows that. It's not controversial in 2021. Yes, we have climate change as an issue. That's not controversial. But the ideas that are coming from places like Vancouver City Hall are peculiar. I mean, they're not based on the energy intensity of our lives. It takes so much energy to do things that we do every day. Even when the world pulls back from the amount of aviation that we've been used to over the years, you take that up because of COVID, you can see that the amount of oil consumption has not really much changed. A little bit less, but there is a voracious appetite. And, you can debate whether that's good or bad. Would you rather see people not using any energy, living in caves? Well, maybe. Or there being fewer people. Maybe that's a debate some people want to have. But if you're a practical person who's looking at the actual situation we have and asking, serious questions about how we do things, you have to be looking at ways to transform the energy system in a way that still allows there to be energy products for people. That's really the biggest challenge we have for humanity right now.
Now, just over the last few years, all of a sudden, natural gas has become some kind of dirty fuel, which I don't understand because our skies are relatively clear in North America where we've switched over to natural gas or other fuels were used for energy and transportation and so on. Why all of a sudden is this considered dirty, and is there anything we can do about it?
Well, it's considered dirty by some because it has an amount of CO2 in it. But by others, it's sort of glass half full or half empty. I'm a half full type, frankly, because I think the fact that LNG, or natural gas from British Columbia in particular, is lower in CO2 than other natural gas is a good thing. I think the fact that natural gas is lower in CO2 emissions than using coal to make electricity, that's a fact. And so in normal human affairs, we have to settle for things that aren't just perfect exactly the way we want in every sense every day. We always do that on pretty much every issue. And energy should be the same. You can imagine a nirvana state where there's no emissions. Okay, go ahead and imagine that, but how do you do it? I'm just looking at a comparison of forecasts of energy transition over the last number of decades. There's an analyst called Vaclav Smil. He's at the University of Manitoba. He's written many scores of books on energy. He's probably the foremost expert in the world. He's just partnered with J.P. Morgan, yes, the investment bank, to come up with his annual survey. He's looked at 7 different forecasts of how long energy transition would take. And going back to the 1970s, right up until current time, you have these wild hypotheses. For example, it would take, one prediction in about 1980 said it would take until 2005 to make the U.S. energy system 50% renewables based. In 1995, it was predicted that by about 2025, it would get to 50%. It was predicted around the same time that it would take even less time. It would take just 20 years, by 2030, to get to about 35%. Where are renewables in U.S. primary energy today? They're at about 11, 12% tops. And, that is progress. That is representing a very significant shift. But so great is the energy demand, the usage, that, it hasn't happened. So there you've got Google coming up with their 2030 clean energy plan. Recently, they too have made this prediction of a tripling of renewable energy. And just like all the previous forecasts, there's no way a reasonable person would look at the facts out there and say, yeah, that's going to happen. So Google has joined the Clinton Presidential Advisory Panel, the Carter administration, the physicist Bent Sorensen, the IPCC, in all of these predictions. And I'm not sure what the purpose of them is when it's plain to see that there's just no way. I think the argument for it is, look, it's aspirational. It'll make people want to do this. It'll make them want to shift to renewables. Well, yeah, but it's not true. It's not how things turn out. And I think what's happened as a result is it's shifted the focus of where some of the work needs to happen. I mean, I'm a believer in renewables. I'm not against renewables at all. I don't think anyone should be. There's no reason to be, except you just need to be realistic about their progress in adoption. But I think it's been at the expense of being practical about developing and improving the fuels that we already rely on. So, back to natural gas and LNG, Jim. Like, how do we improve that? How do we create, say, natural gas that uses the billions and billions of dollars of energy infrastructure, ranging from, the upstream gas processing plants, billions and billions invested in that in BC, to the pipelines that bring it on the main trunk line to your local neighborhood, to the little gas line that taps, your neighborhood line, so it goes into your house, so you've got hot water. Like, all that energy system has taken decades to build, or longer, and a massive investment, and it works really well in getting energy to your home. Well, what if that natural gas, over time, you remove the CO2 through different technologies that exist that you could do? I mean, that seems like a really smart solution, rather than these wild forecasts that inevitably fall not just short, but they're just, not even remotely realistic. That's what I think we can do to protect the environment and also supply the energy we need in our lives.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlin, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration, with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, can we dig a little deeper into this new energy report featuring famed Canadian energy expert Václav Smil?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think what's interesting about it is that we see, yes, there's increases in good things like wind and solar, lots more, but we still have an increasing amount of CO2 emissions. Our fuel systems are getting more efficient. They have less CO2 in them, but we're consuming more fuel, which is quite an interesting phenomenon. If you look at some of the areas of potential growth, you look at transportation, that uses a lot of oil. I think we're going to see electrification of the transportation systems. When you get into industry, I think it becomes a little more difficult to make those changes because of the need for industry to have the heavy, reliable use. And I know you'll hear it often said, well, look, making steel doesn't necessarily require coal because there's a process that someone has invented that is going to take coal out of it. Well, it will be a long, long time before the level of global steel production is affected by that kind of innovation. And in the meantime, how do we make sure the coal that we do use is responsibly sourced from places that have high ESG, environmental, social, and governance scores, like Canada does, by the way, and we do produce a lot of steelmaking coal here. It's an asset of Western Canada that the world wants quite a bit of. So that's something where we can be, part of that more practical global transition. There's a few other trends that Professor Smil has found. You've got in China, we hear a lot about Chinese energy. If you're an energy wonk, often it's in the context of there being a huge surge into renewables, which is true. it's a vast energy system, and of course, the population being its size needs so much, and that tends to mask part of what's going on. We're seeing a surge in nuclear in China. There's additions to their fleet there, and they want to more than double it by 2030. So it's a vast amount of electricity that's going to come from nuclear there. And it's funny, just a few days ago, the news came out that a nuclear plant in New York State has been closed down because it's been opposed by the anti-nuclear activists who, I think on safety arguments, have challenged it. And, they've been successful in challenging it, which is really too bad when you think that nuclear energy is clean energy. It's why Ontario has got a very favorable low emissions profile. It's why France loves to boast about being a low emissions country, because it has a ton of nuclear there, and they run those fast trains, the TGVs, those all run on electricity that's made from nuclear. They import, some other electricity from Germany and places, but, hugely dependent. And so wouldn't you want to see more of that? I mean, in Canada, there's just been across some of the western provinces an agreement to develop small reactors that would be used in industry, I think, particularly in the oil sands. Imagine the emissions profile of the Canadian oil sands, which is, part of a problem it's got. What if we took out most of those emissions needed for the production of oil sands, crude oil? What if we did that? Well, that would get us to the goal that Canadian policymakers do have of greatly reducing the emissions profile of that product, and it would give it a much longer life, because it's going to be challenged increasingly by, different climate-based rules, and it will be challenged to innovate. I mean, that's what rules do. They force compliance, and compliance creates innovation. So it's actually not a bad problem to have if it's going to help us clean up things. So there's nuclear for you. I mean, it's a solution for many of our problems, and yet to so many of the kind of environmental, if you will, faction. I mean, we're all environmentalists. I'm certainly an environmentalist, but when you're thinking more of the environmental policy advocacy, it's so uncommon to hear nuclear talked about as a solution, which I don't understand at all. Like, why not take a technology that works, that can be built to a massive scale, that has no emissions whatsoever, and decarbonize the world with it? Why is anyone against that? It's hard to see.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Well, according to Vancouver City Hall, we shouldn't be digging into the ground for anything, for any reason. But yet you've come up with a study that says experts are predicting a nearly 500% increase in mineral demand created by the push to decarbonize the world. How can you not dig up something and not use energy?
Well, yes. I mean, I think today we're talking about all the same issue in slightly different ways. And, you look at the expectation that we will have decarbonizing energy systems in Canada and everywhere else. What are the implications for material demands? And of course, it points to the need for metals, in particular, metals and certain minerals that are needed for industry and electric motors. Electric batteries are the story of the future. And right now, we are still lacking some of the answers to be able to scale mining. anyone who's interested in the progress of Tesla and its competitors from the conventional car industry that are all jumping into electric cars, except Toyota, they're doing hydrogen, which might be a good way to go, by the way. But everyone is crashing forward with this, but we haven't answered some of these questions. You know, we've got potential mines in British Columbia that have not been developed because there are unsurmountable, to date, technical problems with managing the environmental footprint of them. So that ore body is there. The geologists have found it, mapped it. The capital markets have said, yeah, this is good, let's get going. But then the regulators say, no, we're not going to let you do this. And one of the reasons that some of that happens is the presence of something known as ARD, or acid rock drainage. That's something that occurs in mines that have got certain characteristics. I'll bet some of your listeners know a lot about ARD, or acid mine drainage, AMD as it's also known. But it's a real problem because it's toxic. It's a threat to the environment when you have acidic mine drainage. It's sitting there in a tailings pond. Mount Poly, by the way, a lot of people think that was toxic water. It wasn't toxic at all. It did not have ARD characteristics. It was really just the water you'd have if you ground up some local rocks and put it in a solution. And that's really lucky, because when it spilled into the lake, which was, of course, a big problem and very bad, it didn't have the amount of consequence that it could have had it been ARD. But there's other tailings ponds. You look at some mines in the north, in Northwest Territories and Yukon, they had really serious problems with historic legacy mines that have still got ARD present. So what do you do about it? You've got to treat it. You know, there's a great example. Anyone who goes to Whistler for the weekend drives past this example every time. That's Britannia Mine. And many people are familiar with the damage to Howe Sound over a long period when the leaching water from that closed mine, closed in, I think, the 1970s, after having a very long, spectacular run, that polluted Howe Sound. And so they went through a very elaborate long-term remediation process that has been quite successful in capturing the copper before it goes in and pollutes Howe Sound. So, you know, that's a good outcome, but very expensive. And I'm not sure if it's 100% perfect, but it's done a pretty good job. When you look at other mines that are either new or historic ones, where you have ARD, you know, the question is always, well, what's the economic solution for it? Because sometimes you can have a solution that works in theory or works in the lab, but does it work in the field at scale? Is it economic? And so this is a really interesting field. It's starting to grow a little bit, and I've actually been getting to know the work of a UBC professor, a synthetic biologist, who has recently become quite well known. His name is Vikram Yadav. He became well known because an earlier innovation he developed to treat oil sands waste was acquired by a company from the United States that is backed by Bill Gates. So this has got the kind of, you know, halo effect of a Bill Gates initiative. And the latest thing out of Professor Yadav's lab deals with ARD. It's a process that he's now taking into the field, and that will be developed over the next couple of years. And it's really quite exciting stuff. So, you know, Vancouver has always been a mining capital for junior mining stocks and for technology, engineering, geologists, and now I think it has the promise to become a global capital of this breakthrough technology to allow the clean energy transformation to occur.
Stewart, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society. His website, resourceworks.com. You can find him on Twitter at SJMuir. If you have any questions for Stewart or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howestreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at House Street. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.